Welcome to this week's Explainer. For Week 8, we are unpacking the absolute essentials of project monitoring, specifically focusing on progress tracking and reporting. We're going to explore how progress tracking acts as the vital nervous system of literally any successful project. We'll look at applying diagnostic tools, developing comprehensive reports, and, absolutely crucially, how to manage stakeholder expectations through transparent communication. Let's get into it.
Okay, think about this for a second. Have you ever realized a project was completely failing only when it was entirely too late to save it? It is a terrifying feeling, right? You see a ton of activity, your team is incredibly busy, the budget is definitely being spent, but then out of nowhere, the deadline arrives and the actual deliverables fall dramatically short. Well, the difference between a project that is merely moving and a project that is actually on track comes down to one single thing: effective monitoring and control. Here's our roadmap for today. We're covering 1. The pulse of your project. 2. Tracking tools and techniques. 3. Crafting clear progress reports. 4. Navigating issues and risks. And finally, 5. Managing stakeholder expectations.
Let's start with Section 1, the pulse of your project. Before we can even use our tracking tools, we have to understand what it is we're actually measuring. And the crucial point here is that monitoring isn't just filling out paperwork. It's the continuous, ongoing evaluation of your project's vital signs against an established baseline. Just like the project management body of knowledge outlines, this is something you do throughout the entire project. It's about collecting data, keeping a close eye on project health, and figuring out if you need corrective or preventative actions. Because, honestly, it's not enough to just log hours. You have to constantly evaluate if those hours are actually moving you closer to your goals. To put into perspective just how vital and historic rigorous monitoring is, let's look at the Great Pyramid of Giza. Our sources note that this took 20 years to complete. They had to organize a massive workforce of between 100 and 200,000 salaried workers. Think about the logistics of housing, feeding, paying, and coordinating that many people. Yet, despite those monumental challenges and using the fairly crude tools they had back then, the construction accuracy is estimated to be within 0.05% of the original plan. That is wild. You simply do not achieve that kind of precision without incredibly relentless progress tracking and quality control.
Which brings us nicely to Section 2, tracking tools and techniques.
So we know we need to track things, but how do we visualize that data so we can actually act on it? Well, our source material highlights a few proven methods that really scale depending on what you need. First, you've got your work breakdown structure, or WBS. This breaks the project into manageable hierarchy components, like, say, separating a software build into distinct design, coding, and testing phases. Then there are Gantt charts, which give us a graphical representation against a time frame, showing exactly when those phases overlap on the calendar. And for the really complex stuff, you have the critical path method, or CPM. This uses mathematical algorithms to analyze which sequence of activities has the absolute least amount of scheduling flexibility. If you're building a skyscraper, CPM is what tells you exactly where a minor delay in pouring concrete is going to derail the entire project.
Now, a really simple but powerful way to keep an eye on things is a milestone slip chart, using a red, amber, and green, or RAG, flag system. It compares your planned progress to your actual progress. By using these visual flags, everyone on the team instantly knows the status without having to read through a massive document. Green, you're on plan or doing even better. Amber, that's a warning that a deliverable is slipping. And red is an immediate, loud alarm that you are completely off plan. It cuts right through the noise and forces a conversation about what specific action is needed right now to get back on track.
And if you want to pull all of these elements into one holistic view, our sources point to the project canvas. It's an incredibly powerful visual platform that keeps everyone perfectly aligned. Instead of burying your key information in some 100-page document nobody actually reads, the canvas captures your objectives, scope, stakeholders, resources, and risks all in one single visual layout. It makes understanding and communicating the big picture super easy and really fosters a collaborative team environment. Moving right along to Section 3, crafting clear progress reports.
Okay, having the data is one thing, but sharing it properly is another game entirely, and it is vital to separate two distinct concepts here. A progress report describes what your team has actually accomplished. It's the raw facts, how many lines of code were written, how many bricks were laid. But a status report, that describes exactly where the project stands right now compared to where you promised you'd be. It evaluates the variances in schedule and cost. You have to explain not just what was done, but whether what was done actually aligns with your established baseline target. They are not the same thing.
When you're crafting these reports, remember this.
A solid report definitely looks backward to log the effort, but more importantly, it forecasts forward. First, you evaluate the variance. That's the gap between your target and your actual performance. Next, you identify the corrective actions you need to take. And finally, you forecast to predict the project's expected completion cost and timeline. Your stakeholders don't just want a history lesson about yesterday. They desperately need to know what to expect tomorrow.
Next up, Section 4, Navigating Issues and Risks.
So, we have to diagnose the diseases that threaten our project's pulse. And to do that, you must clearly draw a line between mitigating a future threat and deploying an immediate cure for an active problem. A risk is a potential future event. It involves uncertainty. An issue, however, is beautifully described in our texts as a risk whose time has come. It is actively happening right now. You plan and prepare for risks. You must immediately resolve and track issues. According to our sources, including the PMBOK guide, identifying risks is absolutely not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of maturity. A strong project manager probes the data and encourages the team to expose potential pitfalls early. We're talking about things like poorly defined requirements, a lack of management support, or inexperienced resources. Flagging these early shows you have a prepared team that prefers proactive anticipation over last-minute panic.
But we have to talk about a massive cultural roadblock highlighted in the research. Beware of the kill the messenger culture. If you work in an organization where mistakes are punished severely, it's just human nature to protect yourself. If someone gets punished for admitting there's a bug in the code or the two components just aren't compatible, that bad news simply gets suppressed. And if you have that kind of culture, your project is going to flatline without any warning whatsoever, because your team will be too terrified to give you the true status. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, Managing Stakeholder Expectations. Because at the end of the day, all the charts and graphs in the world are totally useless if you cannot manage the human beings who rely on this data. This quote comes from the Management Lessons of the Big Dig, which was one of the most complex mega projects in history. And it proves that tracking is ultimately about building trust, not just crunching numbers. When you build a trusting, honest relationship with stakeholders through total transparency, they'll respect you, even when the news isn't perfectly green. We see this recommendation echoed across all our texts. Look, handing over glowing, overly optimistic reports might feel really good today, but transparency and objective data are the only things that will maintain stakeholder trust when challenges inevitably pop up. Creating a false sense of security is downright dangerous. You've got to establish open channels, understand the intentions of your stakeholders, and proactively address their concerns before they turn into major roadblocks.
As we wrap up this week's explainer, I want to leave you with a critical thought. We've seen how tracking progress, using the right reporting tools, defining risks versus issues, and demanding absolute transparency all connect to form the nervous system of your project. So how will you apply this transparency in your next endeavor to guarantee your stakeholders never lose trust in the process? Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into project monitoring. Catch you next time.